What has happened to the market for electric cars? The end of the government's rebate scheme has had a part to play, no doubt, but what else is putting the brakes on what seems to be an important tool in reducing transport emissions?
There's concern some electric car owners will be paying too much as the government introduces road upkeep charges for plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles.
There are concerns New Zealand will become a dumping ground for high-emission cars after the government's decision to slash the clean car standard by 80%.
I feel it's a really devastating decision by the government.
There's been a dramatic slowdown in electric vehicle sales.
Recently here in New Zealand, prices for new EVs have been slashed and then slashed again after sales fell off a cliff.
After several years of rapid growth, EV registrations have dropped sharply. I'm Amanda Gillies, and today on The Detail, I'm looking at the reasons for this. Is it the government's fault for removing the clean car discount and weakening the clean car standard? I'll get an EV expert to give me the real oil.
But I think the government has, they've really leveraged the politicisation of EVs to their advantage.
More from Ed Harvey in a moment. But first, I'm down at the Port of Auckland. I want to know how many cars arrive here every year, what type of car is the most popular. I'm talking petrol, diesel, EV, hybrid, and if there are any new trends emerging.
Hi Amanda, I'm Chris Mills. I'm the General Manager of Marine Multi-Cargo and Cruise here at the Port of Auckland.
Fantastic. I want to know, Chris, how many vehicles are coming through Auckland right now?
It's quite an exciting topic at this time of year. We are probably doing between 15,000 and 18,000 vehicles per month, and that works out to about 200,000 cars per year, which is pretty exciting for us.
How does that compare year on year? Because I thought there was maybe a dip last year.
There was, yeah. Last year we saw our lowest car numbers, which were around 180,000 vehicles, but we're seeing an increase now of 22%. And we're hopefully getting back to peaks in the next few years of around 250,000 cars per year. So, as the cars climb back, for us it's really the canary in the coal mine. We're starting to see the economy pick up and a whole lot of different factors, and for us it's cars.
And what sort of cars are we talking? Are we talking EVs, hybrids, petrols, the dirty old diesel?
We're talking everything from Ford Rangers, Toyota Hiluxes, Toyota RAV4s. In December was the biggest selling passenger vehicle. We're seeing BYDs, we're seeing a whole lot of new vehicles come out of China, a whole lot of new manufacturers, which is exciting for us. But yeah, it's pretty widespread. As demand increases, I think people are really enjoying the choice they're getting too.
I want to talk EVs in particular. Where are we at with them? Are the numbers slumping, or are we seeing more or less coming through?
December stats talk about, I think EVs were around 600 units for December. A year before that, December 24, that was over 800. So we're talking about a decrease in around 30% of EVs. And we're also seeing similar numbers in terms of reductions around plug-in hybrids.
What are you putting that down to?
I think as technology evolves, what we're starting to see is a switch from these type of vehicles to non-plug-in self-charging hybrids, so the petrol hybrid equivalent. And we're seeing those numbers really boom. In December, there was 2,700 units registered in New Zealand.
Is there any issue with storing EVs here, with the battery or putting them as they come into the country?
I think we've learnt a lot over the last little while around battery storage and things like that. And I don't see any major issues with that. They come with all the information provided, and people get to make their choices as well. So we're happy with that.
When it comes to the EV, where are we buying them from? Is China sort of emerging as the front runner now as opposed to Tesla?
Yeah, I guess what we've seen with the US-China trade changes over the last 24 months, we've seen a whole lot of new manufacturers choose Australia and New Zealand as places of destination. So I think over the last year or so we might have seen upwards of 15 new car manufacturers come to New Zealand, which is exciting. We're talking BYDs obviously, Jaycos, different cars like that, which is great.
And you just drove me here around the port in an EV. What's your take?
Well, we love the BYD. We, as a port, we are really conscious around our sustainability footprint here. Obviously, we've got the world's first marine tug as well in Sparky, but we're doing what we can for the environment, and what we do is we replace fleet. We choose electric where we can.
And looking ahead, what are you expecting? Do you reckon there'll be a bump back up in EVs, or are we going to get more and more back to the petrol and diesel?
No, I think this new self-charging hybrids is the way of the future, really, where It's now at 39% of market share, which is equivalent to petrol. So petrol's head-to-head at 39% as well. So, with these numbers, I think there's a real battle on our hands about non-plug-in hybrids, petrol hybrids versus petrol. So it's going to be an exciting challenge.
Ed Harvey is a long-time EV fan. His passion started as a kid on the family beef and sheep farm in Marlborough.
For some reason, I was one of those kids that was very interested in electronics and sort of renewable energy since a very young age. I think since I was about 9 or 10, I wanted to build an electric car, and I was right into solar panels and all sorts of things like that. So I'm not really sure where that came from, particularly growing up on a farm. I mean, my parents they always approached farming with quite a strong environmental focus, which I'm sure sort of rubbed off on me a bit. But yes, I was just fascinated with, generating power for free essentially out of a solar panel and the concept of electric vehicles. So that kind of stuck with me. I studied electronics engineering, and in my final year at university, I decided to convert my Honda Accord to electric. So it was getting a little bit tired. It was sort of starting to burn oil. And I sort of thought, well, this is actually the opportunity I've been waiting for, and was lucky enough that one of my lecturers at the time was happy that I did that as my sort of final year honours project essentially at university. So that was a big project, a huge amount of fun.
How long ago was this?
This would have been about 2013 when I finished it. So I didn't actually finish it in my final year at uni. That was 2012. It took a little bit longer than I was hoping, but I did still pass the paper, fortunately. So you probably took about 2 years in the end, including getting it fully certified and road legal. It was a neat project because at the time there was very few electric vehicles on the road. There was might have been 400 or 500 sort of the early Nissan Leafs and some of the Mitsubishi iMeds, which were some of the first EVs in the country. And so for a lot of people, when I took them for a drive, it was the first time they'd ever been in an EV.
Well, that was going to be my question. You could drive it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I did about 100K on a charge, which was, you've got to remember as well, this was back in 2013. So the battery technology back then was not as advanced as today by any means. They were still lithium-ion phosphate batteries, so not the really old lead-acid ones that people used to use. But yeah, it was more than enough for driving around town, and it was a lot of fun. I learned heaps.
He has since sold it and replaced it with a newer EV, and he now runs EVNEX, an EV smart charging company in Christchurch. He firmly believes electric cars are the future of transport here. Not only are they good for the environment, he says, but also our wallets as well. But right now, fewer Kiwis are joining him in the switch to electric. He has the numbers.
We're definitely not soaring. So 2025 was not the best year. It was, I would say, sort of flat, if not a very moderate growth in terms of, I'm talking pure BEVs, what we call battery electric vehicles here, so not hybrids. So we had just over 9,000 sold in 2025, which was about just over a 4% market share, which was a slight increase from the year before. But if we compare that to 2023, there was 26,000 sold. So a 10% market share. That was the last year of the clean car discount. And even the year before that, in 2022, we had just under 20,000. And again, compare that with just over 9,000 last year. It's a huge drop, which is really disappointing for those of us in the industry. But yeah, look, I think we'll absolutely get there.
The clean car discount he just mentioned was scrapped by the government. The government has also introduced road user charges for light EVs and more recently cut the clean vehicle standard by nearly 80%. Here's 3 News covering that in November last year.
Under the standard, the automotive industry is required to meet set emissions targets. And while the imported motor vehicle industry is calling it a victory, EV advocates Drive Electric say it's a devastating move.
The Clean Car Standard, introduced in 2023, requires the automotive industry to meet annually decreasing emissions targets. Importers could accrue credits for being under, but face large fines for being over.
Our industry has been really hit hard by the Clean Car Standard. We've been calling it a stealth tax. It's a large penalty that has been placed onto the vehicles that we try and bring in for average Kiwi families. And the size of those penalties, which can reach up to sort of $3,000, pushes those cars out of the reach of Kiwi families.
Drive Electric's chair Kirsten Corson disagrees, calling the change embarrassing.
when you think Australia are creating a penalty of $100, we've reduced our penalty to $15. What's going to happen? Oh, well, we're going to end up being the dumping ground and importing a whole lot of dirty vehicles into this country that will spend decades on our roads.
Ed, why do you think the government weakened it? What was driving them, no pun intended?
Look, they would say they didn't think it's working. They would probably say that, look, the market share's way down. That's proving that Kiwis don't actually want electric vehicles. But I think the government has, they've really leveraged the politicisation of EVs to their advantage. You'll remember the ute tax.
Yes.
It wasn't actually about utes, it was about high-emitting vehicles, but it was very effective language at playing to the emotions of people who felt that, farmers and tradies weren't getting a fair go, and it really sort of pitted EV drivers against farmers and tradies in a way that just wasn't constructed right. It didn't make sense. But, they really used that to their advantage. It was very good timing in the election cycle. But what they've actually done, I think, is reinforced a lot of the misinformation around EVs. The reality is that they are actually getting to the point now where they are suitable for a lot of those uses. So there are a lot of tradespeople actually now that are getting hybrid utes like the BYD Shark, and they're absolutely loving them. And so, I think they've really played quite a strong part in perpetuating a lot of that misinformation, which is really disappointing. And as I say, I think a lot of it is around electric vehicles have become highly politicised, and the government has leveraged that to their advantage and hasn't shown leadership in a technology that's actually going to save Kiwis money.
Do you think the industry, because there's a lot of this obviously policy flip-flopping, so to speak, can you guys survive this, or do you think this sort of uncertainty scares off buyers and perhaps suppliers alike?
It does. Look, it's done huge damage to the industry, right? So there was a lot of fledgling businesses who were building, whether it be EV charging infrastructure like us, or battery recycling, or EV service specialists that were starting to grow quite well back in 2022, 23. And it's done a huge amount of damage to those businesses and has lost a lot of confidence. I think we do require a bipartisan approach to electrification in general, not just vehicles, but broader as well. Vehicle importers as well, they need years, not months, of notice to plan and schedule what sort of vehicles they're going to bring into the country. We can't be changing these policies every few months, right? It's incredibly disruptive. And from a consumer perspective, it's a big purchase for a lot of people, right? And so they want to see leadership from the government. They want to see a clear plan, confidence around electric vehicle charging infrastructure and supporting services being rolled out. And so for those people who maybe they could go either way, they're sitting on the fence a bit. If they don't see leadership from the government, what we've seen is that they'll go to the safe route, or at least what they perceive to be the safe route. They might get a hybrid or something like that, because they say, actually, the government just doesn't seem to be showing leadership. They're not really supportive. And so I'm not particularly confident. And, we've got to correct that.
It prompted Ed to write an opinion piece for The Post and on LinkedIn, which included:
the New Zealand government's lack of strategy and ambition around electrification is nothing short of embarrassing. Our Transport Minister is capitulating to the interests of lobbyists and short-term political gains.
Transport Minister Chris Bishop publicly replied to his LinkedIn post, admitting the system wasn't really working and saying he'd be happy to chat about it. Ed gives some credit for responding.
That was really good. So, he said that the clean car standard hasn't really worked, and he said at the time that there was some good progress happening on the public EV charging network. The national government did make a significant commitment to investing in the public charging network. I think it was 10,000 chargers by 2030. We're well short of that.
It currently stands at just under 1,400.
Yeah, I would call it the Kiwi build moment. Yeah.
Still waiting for that announcement to see what's going to happen there. But yeah, as I say, credit to Chris. I'm hoping to catch up with him soon, actually, to sort of discuss policy and how they're thinking about this going into the election cycle this year. And so I'm sure that'll be a good conversation.
This is an election year, Ed. The likelihood of you getting any traction on this, because it's obviously something the government really doesn't want to deal with right now. What are you feeling on that?
Look, I think they're going to look silly if they don't do something about it. And even if we set the environmental considerations aside, the reality is that the electric vehicles long-term are just going to be better for Kiwis' pockets. Far lower maintenance costs, far lower refuelling costs. From an energy independence perspective, we're going to end up relying a lot less on foreign countries. often whose interests don't align with their own. So there is a really, really strong story to tell about electrification, even if we're not talking about the environmental benefits. So, look, I hope they do see the light running up to the election, the National Party, and to sort of reconsider their policy in this area. I think there's a chance that they might do that, but we'll just have to see.
Look, if the government doesn't do anything, and what impact is that going to have on the industry and also globally for our sort of clean, green image that we have?
It's not going to be great, right? And look, the technology is still advancing rapidly. China is doing a huge amount in terms of advancing the number of options and the competitiveness of the vehicle options we have. China's reaching around sort of 40% electric vehicle market share. And fortunately, in New Zealand and Australia, we have essentially no tariffs for Chinese imported vehicles. And so that is meaning that from an affordability perspective, they are very, very competitive already, particularly if you're looking at a total cost of ownership, lifetime cost of ownership perspective. And so it will happen even without government support, but it will happen slower. Undoubtedly, it will happen slower. So we need all the help we can get, because we do have emissions targets to hit, and there is significant financial benefits for Kiwis as well if we make this transition faster.
Do you know of any companies that have folded, that have just given up and gone, actually, this is not sustainable in New Zealand now?
Look, yes, there's certainly been some electric vehicle dealerships. There's been a number of businesses that have been involved in the charging industry as well. We've been very lucky that we have a really strong exposure to the Australian market now. So about 65% of our sales or revenue comes from the Australian market now, whereas that's really switched in the last sort of 6 to 12 months. New Zealand is still ticking over okay, but the growth in Australia is just far ahead now. So we're very lucky to have that exposure. If we didn't, it certainly would have been the end of us as well.
Where do we sort of sit globally on the EV uptake?
Yeah, so Norway is the one that you'll probably hear a lot of people talk about, right?
Yeah.
They are way out front. So they're about 95%, I think. In December, they might have been a bit higher than that, but at the moment, it's sitting around 95% pure electric. California, the UK, both about 23%. So obviously this varies all around the world depending on what the specific market or regulations look like. Australia over 2025 was 8.4, so that was pretty much exactly double New Zealand's market share. So we are really trailing behind.
All right, sell them to me. Ed, what's the sort of strongest case for an EV in New Zealand? Is it sort of the cheaper running, the cleaner air? Are we talking energy security, or do you sort of focus more on the climate angle of it?
It's all of the above, Amanda. Yeah, absolutely. So look, it's just, even if we set the environmental benefits aside, we import about $30 million a day of fossil fuels in New Zealand, right? So there is a huge benefit for our economy in decarbonising not just vehicles, but electrifying as many technologies as we can. And so it just makes a lot of sense from that perspective, right? Like, we are going to be forever more addicted to fossil fuels if we don't start electrifying, and electric vehicles are a fantastic place to start. We have extremely high renewable penetration on our electricity network. So as of this morning, it was 98%. So vast majority coming from hydro, wind, geothermal, etc. So that's a resource that we absolutely should be using. And there's a lot more models available, right? Like, even since the subsidies ended, there is a huge number of new EV models that have come out. We're getting plug-in hybrid utes now, which are very popular. A whole range of crossovers, SUVs, sedans, which have got very good range. They're very cheap to run. So we do have road user charges that have been introduced over the last year or so, which has impacted the cost equation a little bit, but they are still very competitive to fuel. And from a total lifetime ownership or cost of ownership perspective, they stack up very, very well against petrol and diesel. Very few moving parts, essentially no maintenance that needs to be done. And look, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about electric vehicles. I was actually just up in Auckland yesterday, and one of the Uber drivers told me that he knows somebody with a BYD Atto 3. He's done about 360,000 K on it as an Uber driver on the original battery, and it still has about 85% of its original capacity. So about 300 K range left on a vehicle that's done 360,000 K over its lifetime. So the batteries have come ahead in leaps and bounds. they are much, much more reliable than I think a lot of people think.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, because we were looking at getting a new car replacement, and we looked at electric, but there were a few things, which was the battery, which is a bit of range anxiety because, we
Yes.
travel out of town a bit. What are the drawbacks of it? And please be honest with me.
Yeah, sure. So there are limited options for a few types of vehicles, right? So particularly large vehicles, if you're looking for a really large SUV, there are a few options, but not many. Ute form factors, particularly around pure BEVs, we don't have many options at the moment, particularly in New Zealand. We do have a really good a plug-in hybrid, the BYD Shark, which has been very popular. And for vehicles that have very high towing capacities, or people that need a vehicle with high towing capacities, we don't have a lot of options for that either. They are all coming. But at the moment, yes, for those people that need to tow a large boat or do a lot of towing of trailers, then the options are a bit more limited. However, for the vast majority of trips that New Zealanders do that are under 400 or 500 kilometres and that they don't involve, towing a large trailer or a boat, then electric vehicles actually stack up really, really well.
Going for a hybrid, what's your take? Is that going halfway? Do you prefer people to go full EV or hybrid okay?
Look, if it means that somebody starts getting more comfortable with the technology, then I think it's a good thing. What we do see with a lot of fleets that give plug-in hybrids to their employees, we often see that they're not actually getting charged at all, which is, then sort of defeats the purpose a bit. They might not have maybe charging infrastructure at home, or maybe their employer hasn't provided them a way to have their electricity paid for if they're reimbursed, if they're charging at home. So that can be a bit of an issue. But from a technology perspective, you are sort of, in some ways you could say that it's the worst of both worlds, in that you have the complexity of both the electric drivetrain, but also an engine as well, and the maintenance that comes with having an engine. So if you don't actually need the extended range or capability that a plug-in hybrid brings, I think you're far better off going with a pure BEV. The maintenance costs will be a lot lower, and the running costs will be a lot lower as well.
What do you, though, say, Ed, to those who go, man, I just love a petrol diesel car, I love the roar of my engine or whatever? What do you say to that?
Well, there's always going to be options for those people, right? And I've got no problem with that at all, right? For people who are passionate about whatever vehicle they're buying, if it's petrol or diesel, and they absolutely love it for those reasons, then that's great. And those options are still going to be around for those people, I think, for a fair bit longer yet.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Chris Mills and Ed Harvey. This episode was produced by Alexia Russell and engineered by Ben Pearce. I'm Amanda Gillies. Mā te wā.